Good morning, everyone. We're going to continue right into Willa Cather, the sculptor's funeral. We're introduced to the family members in the yesterday. We're going to continue with the description of the house and the property. It says the front yard was an icy swamp, and they had a couple of warped planks and extending from the sidewalk to the door that made a sort of rickety footbridge. The gate hung on one hinge and was opened wide with difficulty. Now, on page 475, section 22, we read, "The man was red as his beard, with features swollen and blurred by dissipation and a hot, blazing blue eye. His face was strained, that of a man who is controlling himself with difficulty, and he kept plucking at his beard with a sort of fierce resentment." We're introduced there as Jim Laird, who's fully emerging as one of our major characters in this story. On page 476, we see that the sculptor was more refined than Laird. It says at the very beginning, it said, "He could not help wondering what link there had been between the porcelain vessel and so sooty a lump of potter's clay." So the sculptor was porcelain and Jim Laird was sooty lump of potter's clay. How would you like to be classified as that? I wouldn't. Anyway, 470, okay. When the townspeople return, they all sit in the parlor with the coffin. And as they sit there, the men begin to talk about Harvey. Now, you would think if you're coming to somebody's funeral or their wake or viewing their dead body that you would have good things to say. Well, as they sit there, the men begin to talk about him. They mock his work. They laugh at what a poor farmhand he was when he lived in Kansas. And they just are shocked. They just make fun of the man, and they're just mocking him. Stephen is, again, shocked at how small-minded and cruel these people are, especially since the only recognition that Sand City was going to ever get was achieved by Harvey's birthplace. On page 78, section 34, we read, "The townspeople will come in for a look at me." Now, this was actually something that Merrick had said to his friend. So this was foreshadowing of this very event and what was going to happen at his funeral. "The townspeople will come in for a look at me, and after they have had their say, I shan't have much to fear from the judgment of God." So they were going to mock him. He knew it. He knew it. He knew what the small town people were like. The struggle of the sensitive against the hostile environment is a very common theme in Cather's work. I'll repeat that again because that's important to know. The struggle of the sensitive against a hostile environment is one of her major themes. Jim was 40 years old and went to the same school as Harvey on the East Coast. And he flies into a rage. They grew up together and then they went to school on the East Coast. He flies into a rage and defends his old classmate. He is so fed up with all the nonsense that's going on. Following Jim's graduation, he returned home to work as a lawyer. Jim Laird did. But he had always regretted his decision. Jim is shrewd and intelligent, but he's also an alcoholic. If you lived in a town like that, it kind of drives you a little insane, I guess. The next day, he is too drunk to even attend Harvey's funeral. At the end of the story, Laird dies of a cold driving across Colorado mountains to defend a Sand City townsman. The son of a Sand City townsman. The central conflict of this story is that of value of art versus the vulgar materialism. And remember, this was a time when materialism was taking very big precedence over other things. Henry Stevens notices that Jim Laird is the only person who genuinely appreciates the talent and understands the merit of the sculptor. The story's narration is written in the third person and also in the past tense. And the story's main point of view is by the character we see is Henry Stevens. And that is going to take us to the end of today. And on Monday, we are going to review this story. We're going to have our vocabulary test. I know you don't like to have tests on Monday, but it's not a long test. We're going to test over our vocabulary words and have a major test on this on Wednesday. All right, have a great day and have a great weekend.